Good afternoon, welcome to Fishing for Bees. June 4th, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, warm, low 80s. So anyways, this is probably going to be a longer one. Might be something that you want to stick with. If you think it was valuable and you got something out of it, if you could do me a favor and please like it, share it, and subscribe, I'd appreciate it. So we're going to inspect all our catches for the year. This is all of them but one. One of them's up at the other yard, at the production yard. So this would be the second catch of the year, third, and so forth down the line. But some great questions came up in the community tab, and I'm sorry I don't remember the person's name, but if you check the community tab, you'll see the questions and you'll see our responses. I got more questions from the community tab than on some of my videos. All I did was simply take a picture of the nuke yard the other day and say how much I was enjoying it, and the question started. So I wanted to take some time to talk about why I think nukes are important in swarm catching. First of all, the versatility of them. You've seen my swarm traps. If you haven't, check them out. They're specifically built to catch swarms, not to keep bees in. They're heavy. They are cheaper than something like this, I would believe. There's more versatility with this. So you'll see in my videos I've caught swarms in this setup. So simply all this is a nuke box, right? Nuke box with a solid board on the bottom. This is what I bought originally, was this box and this lid minus this different color strip. I turned it into a telescoping because it bowed on me. And I didn't use them much. I hung them as swarm traps, but I quickly realized that a 5-frame nuke as far as a swarm trap is too small. Will you catch? Yeah, you probably will catch. Will you catch as much? No, you won't. I think one of the most important things with a swarm trap is the size, getting to 40 liters. So I've hung deeps in trees and I've hung these. So a deep in a tree is the same thing, except you're forced to pack it out with 10 frames. With these, I'm only have to put in 5. But I have put deeps in trees or on hive stands or whatever. You know, so a deep with 10 frames, and I've done these with 5 over a void, over an empty. These are really, really slick. If I was to get into swarm catching and I wanted to do it quickly, and maybe I didn't want to build my own traps, you know, there's a lot of variables and things, or if I wasn't too concerned about saving probably close to 20 bucks on my swarm traps versus something like this, I would go with this. When I catch, because there's 5 frames up here, this is where they're at. If I didn't want to look, I could just lift and place on a bottom board and get rid of the void. Let them, if they're down here, let them, you know, drift in, put it right in front of it. Ease, that's super slick, right? Versatility, I mean, obviously I'm keeping bees in 5-frame nukes. If you saw last year, I had a 5 over 5 over 5, which I'm trying to avoid. I want to keep these at 10 frames. The versatility of these as far as being able to catch, keep. One other thing that's great about these, to always have them on hand and available, is shakedown swarms, right? Especially with this setup. If you cleated it, it certainly would be better. I find nothing wrong with these ratchet straps to hold it. And then I'm not putting more hardware on it or anything like that. But, you know, you could cleat it. So that's a little bit on catching in a 5 over 5 nuke setup, 5 frames empty. I don't like keeping in one like this because they bounce their heads off the frame. The frame's right there. So I don't necessarily like keeping in them, although 100% success rate with them. We had one setup like this going into winter at our production yard, and it did great. So when I'm setting them up, I'm using less frames. There's tons of versatility with catching swarms. But the question was more on the keeping of bees in 5-frame nukes, 5 over 5. But I'm not an expert on 5-frame nukes, obviously, as you've seen. I'm just getting into this. I've used them over the years, but I'm focused on it this year. I had mentioned the chimney effect and how I think it helps with my overwintering in Michigan. And by chimney effect, I mean you got 5 frames here and 5 frames here. They start the winter out down here, usually, if everything's set up right. They consume, but on the warm days, they can consume from these other frames. And any bees that are left down here while other bees are walking around the trap, not so much down here, but up here, are being warmed by these bees. In a 10 frame, right? So that's the rest of your 10 frame deep. Heat hits the top goes right out. 5 frames, the heat has all this path to travel, like a chimney effect, right? And as we know, with ventilation at the bottom, and these are not super solid, and there should be ventilation in all your overwintering configurations, but I use a quilt box. The heat rises, right? I had better success in a 5/5 equaling 10 frames than I did with a single deep with 10 frames this way versus this way. So that's a little bit on why I believe they're great for overwintering if you're gonna just run 10 frames. If you're gonna run 20, you're not gonna do it this way. 10 frames, 5/5, which is the plan for all of these. We're slow rolling them. We're not feeding them. We're focusing on overwintering them and possibly giving them away, which the giveaways will be on this channel and probably hidden in the community tab where all these questions came from. Back to versatility, less equipment, right? If I don't have swarm traps and nukes, I just have nukes, then I'm eliminating equipment. The next question is, why put a swarm into a 5 frame instead of a 10 frame deep? You will see when we get into this one that whatever side I installed them on, when I took a peek in here last week, they only had 2.5, barely 3 frames drawn out, leaving 2 frames not being utilized, leaving 2 frames of space that this smaller population of bees needs to patrol and protect from ants. And there are ants on these hive stands. We know that a colony that's stressed is less efficient and less healthy than a colony that's not stressed. So if I would have installed this into a 10 frame, and we can just use this one as the example, right? Another 5, they would have had 1, 2, 3 frames barely being used, 2 vacant, and 5 vacant, equaling 7 frames of space they need to patrol and protect. They don't like that space. That space causes them stress even without pest pressure. But there's always almost pest pressure. Ants, other bees, wasps, small hive beetles, wax moths, right? That's what we're talking about, pressure and stress. I have seen over the years that if you keep them cramped, 1, 2, 3 frames they're using, 2 frames they're not, they will build out these remaining frames faster than if we would have had them in a deep. Less stress, more efficient, overall better, healthier colony. You have to also remember the pause. So the question came up, well, why would you not go from a 5 frame to an 8 frame to a 10 frame? My reason being, when this is already to 5 frames and fully rocking, it'll get to 10 no problem. So meaning if this is 5 frames fully rocking, it'll get to 8 in less than a week, and then you're forced to jump to a 10 or an 8/8. If you're running an 8/8, if you're running 8 frame colonies, great. But I wouldn't purchase 5 frames, 8 frames, 10 frames. I find that to be unnecessary. 5 frame colonies, such as a nuke that you bought, full of brood and bees and resources. Hundreds of bees are being born every day. Thousands of bees are being born every day, right? That'll build out to 10, no problem. Here, tens of bees are being born every day. We're not even 200s. Then we're to hundreds, then we're to thousands, and then it's the snowball effect. It's rocking, right? So it just keeps growing. One of the things I like about keeping bees in these, and I'll use these 2 as an example again, and this might very well be what we see when we get in here. This one has been here longer. This one may already have firstborn. It was caught on May 10th. 24 days is yesterday, although I like to do my math not on the 24 days to firstborn. I like to do it more like 26 to 28 days until firstborn, because in my experience, the queen doesn't lay right away. So if you do the math on 24 from your catch date on firstborn date, you're probably gonna miss it a little bit. So give it a couple days. But anyways, yesterday, according to the 24 math from the day it was caught, would be the firstborn date on this. If this was a weaker colony and I already had bees being born in here, I could switch them very easily. 5 frame, not 10, not 20. Put this one here and this one here. Then the foragers from the stronger colony will be going in the weaker colony. The foragers from the weaker colony originally will be going in the stronger colony. You're forcing drift, you're forcing equalization, you're manipulating the populations for your benefit, for the bees' benefit, to equalize your colonies as they go. So as far as being able to move these things around super easy, find them to be better. I'm really liking them. So that's a couple things on the 5 frames. I'm gonna get inside here now and we're gonna continue to talk about them. This was caught on May 10th. This was the second of, I believe, to be my bees. And when I took a peek in here, they weren't doing much comb building. So again, May 10th, this was caught, 24 days. Today's June 4th. These 2 frames aren't being used. This one's barely being used. There's not much action here. Again, if you were to put this in a 10 frame colony, that's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. Swarms are vulnerable. This was a cast off too, I believe, again, of my bees. So there's a huge pause before firstborn. Also, what I want to say, you know, this isn't an experiment in not feeding, and it's looking like that is not the way to go, because I have never had a colony develop this slow. But I'm not feeding them. They don't have the bees. They don't have firstborn. So I'm going to give it until firstborn to fully evaluate not feeding my swarm catches. They just completely died off on the comb building. But about the space management, you're allowing these bees to focus on brood rearing, to focus on nursing the bees to come, because we have to keep this going. Now let's hope that we see a ton of brood on here and a bunch of nurse bees. That's pretty wild. All honey. Well, here's the problem, and I can't believe they're as calm as they are. I don't see a laying queen in here. Man, I'm telling you, early swarming in Michigan, I believe, has caused us to have poorly mated queens or no mated queens at all. They were swarming, in my opinion, before drone congregations were established. I'm seeing a lot of posts on Facebook for people asking for queens, and I'm wondering if it's because their colonies swarmed and didn't requeen properly. Well, there you go. We have a swarm catch that the queen didn't make it back, make it with, didn't get mated properly. Now they're acting like a queenless colony. So that one didn't really matter that they weren't being fed. There's plenty of pollen, honey, nectar that they could have raised young. They just didn't, because there's no queen. This one right here is a perfect example of why it would have been a problem to have them in a 10 frame. In there, they were pretty good. Here's a big wad of ants and eggs. Normally I don't do much about ants. It's getting to the point where I don't have a choice. This is what you want to see. 4 frames in use. 4 frames in use. I take that back. 5 frames in use. This was caught May 13th. Their firstborn date, according to the 24 cycle, is in 2 days. I got some brood and larvae in this one. If I saw some eggs, that might be the one to donate next door, because now I gotta requeen that thing, and they're gonna have to do it on their own. These are swarms. I don't give them a ton of help. This is too vulnerable to be taking brood, but right? I mean, this is what you want to see. One other thing I'll add, also the difference, pretty well believed to be cast off. This is a primary swarm. I believe a primary swarm. This came with a mated queen, likely, if it was a primary swarm. I'm completely off on the date. They already got firstborn. Look at all that open brood patch. This is what you want to see. Let's go back to the not feeding. This is a success, not feeding. But again, in a 10 frame, you have 5 more frames that they're not utilizing yet. For a month and a half, May 15th, firstborn date, according to my math, is in 6 days. Looks to be much better on the productivity. No eggs. I don't know what to do about that first one, the queenless one. This is a bad yard to be queenless in. Brood, larvae, too vulnerable to steal it to give to the other one. This is what you want to see. Wow. Soon to need another 5. I was concerned in the first colony about not feeding these swarm catches. I'm not concerned anymore. At least for the time of year that I caught them, it was perfectly fine. And a good move on my part, because I don't need them for honey production. I need them for next year. I may take one of these up to the production yard and do a paper combine. Again, this goes along the lines of versatility and options. With these 5 frame nukes, I have that option. I need to move this, I need to take it somewhere, I just screen it and carry it. Screen it and carry it, they're super light. May 18th, firstborn date, a week out. I'll tell you what, I don't know if I dare take one of these frames and put it over there. They're using this as a resource frame. I'm not expecting to see emerge brood on this one. If there's going to be eggs or brood, it's going to be on this frame. And there it is. I'm not going to pull the next one. Obviously, as I get down the line here, they're much less likely to be a candidate to donate anything because they're not as far along as the other ones. All these, they go in order from catches this year. That's what you want to see, colony. Feeding wise, no concerns. They have more bees than the ones next to it. I like this nuke yard. I like being able to inspect, especially on a year like this when I've caught so many swarms. I like to be able to come and inspect really, really super quickly. Add things really, really super quickly. I'm not trying to get them to honey production. May 19th. This was caught just down the hill from here. Not my bees. Nowhere in this area do I have mature colonies mature enough to be swarming. We'll see what happens when nukes start to get to the point of swarming. This one was probably our second biggest one. This might be our best candidate to possibly requeen that other one. Look at this. 5 frames of bees. All 5 frames being worked. How cool is this one, man? Yeah, I've caught huge swarms in this location. They're done. They need a box now. Possibly. Why do I say possibly? Because these bees are dying. And their firstborn date for 24 days isn't until June 12th. Curious if there's any eggs on here, because this is a colony to donate. How is this possible? Best performing swarm this year. What more do I need to see? She's awesome. Remember we talked about drift, right? This is also a viable candidate for drift. Once this brood starts emerging, I take this colony, put it on the end, put the end here, and the returning forest will bring the resources here to draw more comb in that queenless colony, give it more bees. I'll have given it hopefully a frame with an eggs and brood. Drift, forced drift with 5-frame nukes.